The train screamed through the darkness of the Bohemian countryside, its wheels grinding against frozen tracks with a sound like tearing metal. April 1945. The Third Reich was collapsing, burning from both ends, and this train, this cursed, blood-soaked train, was carrying the last fragments of a dying empire toward an uncertain border. Franz Weber stood in the locomotive cabin, his hands trembling on the controls. Not from cold, not from fear, from something darker, something that had been growing inside him for 2 years, ever since they'd stopped telling him what he was transporting. The cabin smelled of coal smoke and oil. His face was black with soot, deep lines carved around his eyes from squinting into tunnel darkness for 20 years. He was 34 but looked 50. The war did that. It aged you in ways that had nothing to do with time. Behind him, through the small window connecting the locomotive to the first passenger car, Franz could see the silhouette of SS-Hauptsturmführer Klaus Ritter. Tall, rigid, with that distinctive peaked cap and the lightning bolt insignia that made Franz's stomach turn. Ritter had been assigned to this transport 3 days ago in Dresden. 3 days that felt like 3 years. "Steady speed, Weber," Otto muttered beside him. Otto was the head engineer, 62 years old, with hands like leather and eyes that had seen too many trains go to too many places. "Don't think, just drive." But Franz couldn't stop thinking, because tonight was different. Tonight, he'd made a mistake. Tonight, he'd looked. The cargo manifest said industrial equipment and secured assets. But Franz had learned that Nazi bureaucracy had a language all its own. Secured assets meant gold, paintings, sculptures, everything the Reich had stolen, now being evacuated before the Red Army arrived. And industrial equipment. Franz's jaw clenched. He knew what that meant too. 2 hours earlier, during a fuel stop at a destroyed station near Plzeň, Franz had walked the length of the train. Not because he wanted to, because the coupling between the third and fourth cars was loose, and Otto's back was too destroyed to crawl under and check it. The train was 11 cars long. The first 3 were sealed box cars with Nazi eagles painted on the sides. Heavy, probably gold, probably art. The 4th through 7th were passenger cars with blacked-out windows. Officers being evacuated, their families, people who'd made the wrong friends and now needed to disappear before the Soviets arrived. Then cars 8 and 9 held supply wagons, ammunition, food, medical supplies, and then cars 10 and 11. Franz had approached the 10th car slowly. It was different from the others, older. A cattle car, really, with wooden slats and heavy padlocks on the outside. There were scratches on the door, recent ones, made from the inside. He shouldn't have stopped, but he did. He shouldn't have looked through the gap in the slats, but he did. Inside, packed like cargo, were people, maybe 200 of them. Men, women, children, sitting on bare wooden floors. No blankets, no heat, thin faces, hollow eyes. Yellow stars still sewn onto some of their coats, though many had torn them off, as if that would matter now. A young woman near the wall had looked up at exactly the moment Franz's eye appeared at the gap. Their gazes locked. She couldn't have been more than 25. Dark hair, matted and dirty. But her eyes, God, her eyes were still alive. Still accusing. Still asking the question Franz couldn't answer. Why? He'd stumbled backward, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Otto had called from the locomotive. "Weber, we're moving." Franz had run back, climbed into the cabin, and hadn't spoken since. That was 2 hours ago. Now they were 30 kilometers from the Czechoslovak-German border, 30 kilometers from whatever processing facility awaited those people in the last cars. Processing. Another Nazi word that meant something unspeakable. The radio crackled. Ritter's voice, sharp and precise. "Weber, increase speed to 80 kilometers per hour. We cross the border in 40 minutes. Franz reached for the throttle, but his hand stopped halfway. 80 kilometers per hour on these damaged tracks? With this weight? It was reckless, dangerous. "Do it," Otto whispered. "Don't make trouble, not now. We're almost through." Almost through. As if surviving the war was just a matter of keeping your head down and following orders. As if 200 people freezing in a cattle car behind them were just incidental. Franz pushed the throttle forward. The locomotive groaned, the pistons screamed, and the train lurched faster into the night. 10 minutes later, the door to the locomotive cabin slammed open. SS-Hauptsturmführer Klaus Ritter stepped inside, bringing with him the smell of leather and cigarette smoke. He was younger than Franz, maybe 28, but he carried himself with the absolute certainty of a man who'd never questioned an order in his life. "Gentlemen," Ritter said, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit. Officers like him never sat. "We have a change of plans." Franz's hands tightened on the controls. Otto stared straight ahead, pretending he couldn't hear. Ritter pulled a folded map from his coat and spread it on the small table bolted to the cabin wall. "Intelligence reports indicate Soviet advance units have crossed into Saxony faster than anticipated. The border crossing at Schönberg is no longer secure." He traced a line on the map with his gloved finger. "We're diverting to the secondary crossing at Weiperti. It's smaller, less guarded, but Allied bombers haven't touched it yet. We'll arrive in approximately 35 minutes. Franz nodded mechanically. Route changes were common now. The whole Reich was a maze of destroyed bridges and cratered roads. But then Ritter said something that made Franz's blood freeze. "Before we cross, we'll be reducing the train's weight." Otto glanced up. "Reducing, sir?" Ritter's expression didn't change. "Cars 10 and 11 will be detached 5 kilometers before the border. There's a siding near the village of Hora Svate Katarini. We'll uncouple there." Franz's mouth went dry. "Detach them, sir?" "But there are—" He caught himself, but not fast enough. Ritter's eyes narrowed. "There are what, Weber?" The cabin fell silent except for the rhythmic pounding of the wheels on the tracks. Franz could feel Otto's warning stare burning into the side of his head. Don't say it. Don't make yourself a problem." "Nothing, sir," Franz managed. "Just, the couplings are old. Might take time." Ritter studied him for a long moment, then turned back to the map. "You'll have 3 minutes. After uncoupling, you'll proceed immediately to the border. Speed is critical. The Soviets have mobile units in the area." "And the detached cars, sir?" Franz heard himself ask. "What happens to them?" It was Otto who answered, his voice flat and lifeless. "Not our problem, Weber. Not our problem." Ritter folded the map and moved toward the door. But before leaving, he turned back, and for just a moment, Franz saw something flicker in those cold eyes. Not quite guilt, not quite doubt, just awareness. "This war is ending, Weber. The question is not what we've done. The question is what we'll have to live with afterward. Some of us have made our peace with that. I suggest you do the same." The door slammed shut. Franz stood frozen, his mind racing. Detach the cars. Leave 200 people on a siding in the middle of nowhere. No guards, no supplies, no way to escape the locked cattle cars. And in a week, maybe 2 when the Soviets arrived. "Don't," Otto said quietly. "Don't even think about it. There are children in those cars, Otto. There are children everywhere. Dead ones, dying ones. You can't save them all." "I'm not trying to save them all. I'm trying to save these." Otto's weathered face twisted with something between pity and anger. "You think you're the first person on this railway to have a conscience? You think you're special? Every day, Franz. Every single day for 3 years, trains like this have been running. And you know what happened to the engineers who objected? They got reassigned to the Eastern Front, where they died in a trench somewhere with their principles intact and their bodies blown apart." Franz stared at the controls, the throttle, the brake, the pressure gauges. Simple machines, simple physics. Pull a lever. The train stops. Push a lever, it goes. 30 years of muscle memory. 30 years of doing what he was told. His wife's face flashed in his mind. Anna. She died in Dresden, crushed under burning rubble when the Allies had firebombed the city. He'd been away, driving another train, carrying another cargo he wasn't supposed to ask about. When he'd returned, there was nothing left, not even a body to bury. He'd asked himself every day since, what was it all for? What did we do to deserve this? And now, here was his answer. This was what they'd done. The train hurtled through a mountain pass, the tracks curving sharply to the right. Franz adjusted the speed, his movements automatic. Through the cabin window he could see scattered lights in the valley below. Hora Svate Katerani, the village where they'd uncouple the cattle cars and leave 200 people to whatever fate awaited them. 20 minutes until they arrived. Otto was right, of course. One man couldn't change anything. One engineer refusing to follow orders wouldn't end the war, wouldn't save the Reich's victims, wouldn't undo 3 years of systematic horror. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was simpler. Maybe it was just about not being the person who looked through that gap in the cattle car slats, saw those eyes staring back at him, and did nothing. Franz's hand moved to the brake lever, not pulling it, just resting there, feeling the cold metal under his palm. "What are you doing?" Otto's voice was sharp now, alarmed. "Checking the pressure," Franz lied. "Gauges are acting strange." "Gauges are fine. Franz, listen to me." But Franz wasn't listening anymore. He was calculating. The train's weight, its speed, the grade of the tracks ahead. How long it would take to slow from 80 kilometers per hour to 40. How much time that would give the people in the cattle cars. How much time before Ritter noticed. Not much. Maybe minutes, maybe seconds. But maybe that would be enough. The radio crackled again. This time it was a different voice, one of the SS guards from the passenger cars. "Hauptsturmführer Ritter requests status update. Are we on schedule for the Hora Svate Katerini stop?" Franz picked up the receiver. His hand was steady now. Strange. He'd been trembling 10 minutes ago, but now that he'd made his decision, the shaking had stopped. "Confirmed," he said into the radio. "Arriving in 18 minutes. Acknowledged." The line went dead. 17 minutes now. 17 minutes to think of something. Some way to slow the train without making it obvious. Some way to give those people a chance. Any chance. To escape before they were abandoned on that siding. But what chance did they have, really? Even if he slowed the train, even if he somehow delayed the uncoupling, there were armed SS guards on board. There were locks on the cattle car doors. There was nowhere to run in the middle of the Bohemian mountains in April 1945. Franz closed his eyes. This was insane. This was suicide. And it wouldn't even work. But then he remembered something. Back at the Plausen fuel stop, when he'd been checking the coupling, he'd noticed something strange about the 10th car, the one with the people inside. The coupling mechanism was old, yes, but more than that, it was damaged, cracked, probably from overloading, from too much weight packed into a car that was never meant to carry living cargo. If that coupling failed, if it happened to fail at the right moment, the train would have to stop. Emergency procedures, safety protocols. Even the SS couldn't override those. It would take at least 30 minutes to assess the damage, recouple the cars, get moving again. 30 minutes, in the dark, in the mountains, with chaos and confusion. It might be enough. Franz opened his eyes and looked at Otto. The old engineer was watching him with an expression Franz had never seen before. Not anger, not fear, just sadness. "I know what you're thinking," Otto said quietly, "and I'm telling you, as someone who survived this long by not being a hero, it won't work. Maybe not. They'll shoot you. Probably. And it won't save those people. You understand that, right? Even if you delay the train, even if you cause problems, Ritter will still uncouple those cars. He'll still leave them on that siding, and then he'll put a bullet in your head for sabotage." Franz nodded slowly. "I know." "So why?" It was a good question, the kind of question that deserved a rational answer. But Franz didn't have one. He just had the image of that young woman's eyes staring at him through the gap in the cattle car, asking why, asking how, asking if he was human enough to care. "Because someone has to," Franz said finally. "Someone has to try." Otto turned away, his shoulders sagging. "Then you're a fool." "Yeah, probably." The train began to slow as it approached a grade. Franz checked the route map bolted to the cabin wall. They were entering the final descent before Hora Svate Katerini. Steep tracks, sharp curves. This was the most dangerous part of the route, the part where engineers had to be most careful with speed and braking. It was also the part where a damaged coupling might, theoretically, fail under stress. Franz reached under the control panel and pulled out a heavy wrench. Standard equipment. Every locomotive cabin had one. "What are you doing with that?" Otto demanded. "Going to check that coupling again, the one on the 10th car. Want to make sure it holds during the descent." "Franz." But Franz was already moving toward the door. Otto grabbed his arm, surprisingly strong for a man his age. "If you do this," Otto hissed, "I can't protect you. I won't lie for you. I won't cover for you. I have a daughter in Hamburg. I'm going to see her again. I'm going to survive this. Do you understand?" Franz met his eyes. "I understand." Otto released his arm, and Franz stepped out into the cold night air. The wind hit him immediately, fierce and biting. He was standing on the small platform between the locomotive and the first car, holding onto the railing with one hand, the wrench in the other. The tracks blurred beneath him, a dizzying rush of darkness and motion. He began to move along the side of the train, using the handholds welded to each car's exterior. It was dangerous work even in daylight. At night, at this speed, it was suicidal. One slip and he'd be under the wheels. But fear had left him now. There was only focus, only the simple, clear objective ahead. He passed the first car, the second, the third. Through the blacked-out windows, he could hear voices, laughter even. The evacuating officers and their families, oblivious to what was happening 10 cars behind them. 4th car, 5th, 6th. The train lurched as it hit a curve, and Franz's foot slipped. For a heart-stopping moment, he hung by one arm over the gap between cars, the tracks rushing past below. Then he found his footing and kept moving. 7th car, 8th, 9th. And then he reached the 10th car, the cattle car. Up close, he could hear the sounds from inside. Whimpers, coughs, a child crying. The scratch of fingernails against wood. Franz dropped to his knees on the coupling platform between the 9th and 10th cars. The coupling mechanism was right there, a heavy iron joint holding the 2 cars together. And yes, there it was, the crack he'd noticed before. A thin fracture running through the coupling housing. It wouldn't take much. A few strikes with the wrench in just the right place, enough to widen the crack, weaken the joint, make it look like a natural failure. But once he did this, there was no going back. Franz raised the wrench and hesitated. What if Otto was right? What if this accomplished nothing except getting him killed? What if those people were going to die anyway, and all he'd do was add his own corpse to the count? From inside the cattle car, someone began to sing, softly, barely audible over the sound of the train. A woman's voice, singing something in Hebrew, a prayer, maybe, or a lullaby for the crying child. Franz brought the wrench down hard. The impact rang through the metal like a bell, once, twice, 3 times. The crack widened, spreading like a spider web through the coupling housing. 4 times, 5. And then he heard the shout from behind him. "Hey, what are you doing?" Franz turned and saw an SS guard standing on the platform of the 9th car, rifle raised. Young kid, couldn't be more than 19. Pale face frozen in confusion and alarm. Franz didn't answer. He brought the wrench down one more time. The coupling gave way with a sound like a gunshot. The 10th car, along with the 11th behind it, began to separate from the rest of the train. Slowly at first, then faster as the distance grew. The brake systems on the separated cars engaged automatically, sparks flying from the wheels as they ground against the tracks. Franz stood up, wrench still in his hand, and watched as the cattle cars fell away into the darkness behind them. The guard was screaming now, fumbling with his radio. "Sabotage! Sabotage! Cars 10 and 11 have separated!" The main train lurched as its sudden weight loss threw off the momentum. Franz could hear Otto in the locomotive cabin fighting to stabilize the speed. Alarm bells were ringing. More guards were emerging from the passenger cars. Franz dropped the wrench and started running back toward the locomotive. Not to escape. There was nowhere to escape to. But because he needed to see Otto one more time. Needed to tell him something. He wasn't sure what. He made it 3 cars before they caught him. 2 guards tackled him from behind, slamming him down onto the coupling. Platform. His head cracked against the metal, and stars exploded across his vision. He felt whole hands yanking his arms behind his back, heard the metallic click of handcuffs. Then they were dragging him through the cars, past the startled officers and their families, toward the command car where Ritter waited. The door opened. Ritter stood there, his face absolutely expressionless. Behind him, Franz could see a map table, radio equipment, other SS officers, frozen in mid-conversation. "Bring him in," Ritter said quietly. They threw Franz into a chair. His head was bleeding, he realized. He could feel warmth trickling down the side of his face. One of the guards hit him in the stomach, driving the air from his lungs. "Enough," Ritter said. The guards stepped back. Ritter walked slowly around the chair, studying Franz the way a scientist might study an interesting specimen. "I knew it," he said finally. "The moment I saw your face in the locomotive cabin, I knew you were going to be a problem. Do you know why?" Franz said nothing. His ribs ached where the guard had hit him. "Because you still think like a human being," Ritter continued. "You still have that weakness, that sentimentality, that pathetic delusion that individual actions matter. That conscience means something." He leaned down until his face was level with Franz's. "It doesn't. Whatever you think you accomplished back there, you're wrong. Those 2 cars will sit on the tracks until we send a recovery team. The prisoners inside will be collected and transported to their destination. Nothing will change. All you've done is delay the inevitable by a few hours." "Maybe," Franz said, his voice rough. "But at least I tried." Ritter straightened up. "Yes, you tried. And for that, you'll be executed for sabotage and treason. We'll stop at the next station and you'll be shot. Your body will be left by the tracks as a warning to others who might be similarly inspired." He turned to the guards. "Take him to the storage car. Lock him in. We'll deal with him at Vejprti." As they dragged Franz out, he caught a glimpse through the window. The separated cattle cars were far behind now, tiny lights disappearing into the mountain darkness. He'd bought them maybe an hour before Ritter sent people back, maybe less. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But it was something. They threw him into a storage car near the back of the train. The back of what remained of the train, anyway. It was dark, cramped, filled with crates and equipment. The guards locked the door from the outside, and Franz was alone. He slumped against a crate, his head throbbing, his body aching. Through a small ventilation grate, he could see the landscape rushing past. They were moving faster now, racing toward the border crossing. Franz closed his eyes. He thought about Anna, about the life they'd planned before the war. A house in Bavaria. Children, growing old together. Simple dreams that seemed impossibly distant now. He thought about Otto, about the daughter in Hamburg the old engineer wanted so desperately to see again. Franz hoped he made it. Hoped that at least one of them survived to remember what happened on this cursed train. And he thought about the young woman in the cattle car, the one with the alive eyes. He didn't know her name, would never know it, but somehow that didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd looked at him, and he'd looked back, and in that moment they'd both been human. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could do in the end. Bear witness, refuse to look away. Try, even when trying was hopeless. The train began to slow. Through the grate, Franz could see lights ahead. A station. Vejprti, probably. The border crossing where Ritter would stop, where they'd take Franz out and execute him for the crime of having a conscience. He wasn't afraid anymore. Just tired. So incredibly tired. The train rolled to a stop with a screech of brakes. Franz heard voices outside, boots on gravel, commands being shouted in German. Then explosion. The entire train shook, and Franz was thrown against the wall of the storage car. Outside, chaos erupted. Gunfire, screaming, more explosions. Through the grate, he could see flashes of light, tracers cutting through the darkness. What the hell was happening? The door to his storage car burst open. Franz expected SS guards, expected a bullet to the head. Instead, he saw men in different uniforms. Soviet uniforms. Red stars on their caps. One of them, a sergeant with a scarred face, grabbed Franz by the arm and hauled him up. "Come on," the Soviets shouted in broken German. "Move." "What?" "Partisan attack. Train is surrounded. Move." Franz stumbled out of the storage car into absolute pandemonium. The entire station was under assault. Czech partisans and Soviet advance units were pouring in from the woods, attacking the train from all sides. The SS guards were fighting back, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, overwhelmed. Ritter was shouting orders from the command car, trying to organize a defense, but it was futile. The war had finally caught up to them. The Soviet sergeant pushed Franz toward the tree line. "Go! Run! Wait! The cattle cars! The people we left behind!" The sergeant looked at him like he was insane. Then understanding flickered in his eyes. "You mean the prisoners? 5 kilometers back. Yes, there are 200 people. Already done. Partisans found them 20 minutes ago. They're being evacuated now. We coordinated the attack to give them time." Franz stared. "How did you—" "Your friend, the old engineer. He got on the radio before they stopped him. Told us everything, where the prisoners were, when the train would arrive. He gave us the intelligence we needed." Otto. Dear God. Otto. Is he dead? They shot him when they realized what he'd done. "I'm sorry." Franz felt something break inside him. Otto. The man who'd just wanted to survive, to see his daughter one more time. The man who'd called Franz a fool for trying. In the end, Otto had been the bravest of them all. The gunfire was intensifying. The Soviet sergeant grabbed Franz again. "We need to leave. Now!" Franz let himself be pulled into the forest, away from the burning train, away from the SS guards and their dying Reich. Behind them, ammunition started cooking off, bright flowers of flame blooming in the darkness. He ran until his lungs burned, until the sounds of battle faded behind him, until the Soviet soldiers finally stopped in a clearing where Czech partisans were tending to a group of people. 200 people, wrapped in blankets, drinking water, being checked by medics. The prisoners from the cattle cars. Franz collapsed against a tree, his legs giving out. He watched as the partisans distributed food, as children were reunited with parents, as people who'd been treated like cargo remembered what it meant to be human. And there, in the group, he saw her, the young woman from the cattle car, the one with the alive eyes. She was holding a child, maybe her sister, maybe someone else's, and speaking quietly to a partisan medic. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up. Their eyes met across the clearing. She didn't smile. Didn't wave, just looked at him with an expression Franz couldn't quite read. Grief, maybe, or relief, or simple exhaustion. Then she nodded once, just once, and Franz nodded back. That was all. No words, no grand gestures, just two people acknowledging each other in the darkness. A Soviet officer approached Franz, a captain with tired eyes. "You're the engineer? The one who sabotaged the coupling?" "Yes. We found your friend's body in the locomotive. He was still holding the radio when they shot him. Brave man. The bravest," Franz said quietly. The captain studied him for a moment. "The war will be over soon, maybe weeks. What will you do after?" Franz looked at the people in the clearing. The survivors, the ones who'd been given another chance because one old engineer decided that principles mattered more than survival. "I don't know," Franz said. "But whatever it is, I'll be able to live with it." The captain nodded. "That's more than most can say." As dawn began to break over the Bohemian mountains, Franz sat with his back against the tree and watched the sun rise. Somewhere behind them, the train was still burning. Somewhere ahead, the war was still raging, but here, in this clearing, 200 people were alive who shouldn't have been. Not because of grand strategy or military genius, just because a couple of railway workers decided that following orders wasn't more important than staying human. It wasn't much. In the vast, grinding horror of the war, it was barely a footnote, but it was something. And sometimes, Franz thought, something was enough.